Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us. Well, let's talk about savings, investment, and managing your debt. But first, April 23rd, we have a primary election. We'll chat about that and some other aspects after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we have some very important topics to take up, and let's get started. Joining me to do that, to start, are two reporters. Tom Lehman, he's the Capital reporter with WGAL, and Justin Sweitzer, he's with City and State Pennsylvania. All right, Justin, I have to start with you. The fact of the matter is we have a primary on April 23rd. It's complicated because there are so many offices that we're nominating, and that's what we're doing, nominating, and we have a closed primary. Democrats can only vote in Democratic primaries, Republican primaries, independents, and other, who knows, they can't vote, and there's obviously some concern about that. But give us a brief overview of April 23rd.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to start off with, Terry, is that Pennsylvania does have closed primaries. So Democrats can only vote for Democrats, Republicans can only vote for Republicans. There has been a push to try and change that in the legislature, but that hasn't happened. So that's not in effect for this cycle. But like you said, we have a lot of races on the ballot this year. There's primaries for Auditor General, primaries for Attorney General, for State Treasurer.
These are three statewide offices.
Three statewide offices. Right now we have a Republican incumbent in the Treasurer's office, a Republican incumbent in the Auditor General's office, and a Democrat in the AG's office. So Democrats are obviously eyeing both the Treasurer's seat and the Auditor General's seat. That's an opportunity to flip those seats into Democratic control. Right. And that doesn't even get into the state legislature, where there's a whole host of seats up for grabs. And even a couple surprise results in those state legislative races could cause some drastic changes in the state capitol. And I'll let Tom add on the state legislative side.
And these statewide offices are important because of the functions they perform. But in addition to that, they also lead to something called the governorship of the state of Pennsylvania and the U.S. Senate, correct?
Sure. I mean, we've had a lot of statewide office holders. The guy who's in the office right now, Josh Shapiro, the former state attorney general, is the latest example of that. So these are important races if you want to use this as a political stepping stone potentially, which is why I think you've seen some candidates who are in this race that a lot of people believe have that upward trajectory. I know, when you look at the candidates, especially on the Democratic side, a lot of these are lawmakers that have had some time in the legislature already. They're looking to try and have that new reach, have that new office, whether they're looking for the governor's office or whatever, not necessarily in the cards, depending on their future plans. But at the same time, these are definitely high-profile offices. It definitely increases your profile, definitely increases your role with state government.
And like you said, Terry, they're important offices and they have important functions, but they can serve as stepping stones at times. And you look to the past. Right. There's Governor Shapiro, who is an attorney general. There's Governor Tom Corbett, who is an attorney general. So these races are big
Senator
positions.
Casey.
Right. Senator Casey, absolutely. So it's really a big opportunity for some of these politicians who have looked to expand their footprint. You have people like Malcolm Kenyatta running for attorney general. He's a Democratic state rep from Philly. He's been involved with the Biden campaign a little bit. Has some involvement on a White House task force. And if he ultimately wins this race for Auditor General, that's probably going to expand his reach, his influence a little bit within the party. So. Yeah, these races are, definitely an opportunity for these candidates.
But the fact of the matter is that Democrats and Republicans want to keep their primaries closed. They don't want people in the other party getting involved in their primary elections. I think
it depends on who you ask, though, because I think
really,
I think there's a lot of Democrats and Republicans, to your point, Terry, that I've spoken with who like having that closed nature. They like sort of saying you got to be part of the club to elect our officers, if that's how you want to look at it. But you've also seen some lawmakers, some of the more pragmatic ones you might want to suggest in this particular realm, who have been saying, listen, we spend a lot of money on elections. There's no reason why we shouldn't allow somebody to switch over. You don't get to vote in both, but just for one.
No, I understand that, but one of the arguments is that if, let's say we're talking about a Republican primary, the Democrats, if they could vote in the Republican primary, would try to nominate the weakest of the Republican candidates.
Well, sure, and that's, you know, the reality of that situation, and that's a concern that some people have suggested. But you could also just change your registration to whatever party you want already. So I don't know that there's a huge firewall, so to speak, on preventing that from happening.
All right, we're going to run to a break. Student teacher stipends, that's a subject that's been in the news, and we'll talk about that. I did that back in the day, a long time ago. We'll get to, should student teachers get stipends?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Well, I student taught back in the day, as they say, and I did not get a nickel. There was no stipend. All right, Tom Lehman, stipends, they're here?
They are. The state this week is beginning the application process. If you're a student teacher, you can apply for these $10,000 stipends that you can use to basically pay all the expenses that you would otherwise be paying out of pocket, so that you can go do your student teaching duties at schools all across Pennsylvania. I did a couple stories on this, spoke to student teachers, and the one thing they said is, listen, transportation, gas, whether you're taking the bus, whatever
Sometimes
it is.
housing, right?
Indeed, and that's the thing, is that these positions are not paid. And it's a necessary part of you actually becoming a teacher. You have to fulfill these requirements, but students who are in the teaching programs don't get paid for it. So it's a very difficult thing. I mean, I heard some stories about students having to Uber to their schools they were teaching at. Yeah, because they couldn't afford to fix their car.
And it took a while to do that. Was it that controversial?
I don't know that it was controversial. It was one of those items that was sort of hanging around in the budget cloud last year from the great private school scholarship dust-up of 2023. But no, I mean, it was one of those issues where there was a lot of bipartisan support, and I think the $10 million appropriation for it resulted from the fact that you had lawmakers on both sides who attended a press conference this week with the governor, all getting together and saying this was a good thing, we needed to do this.
I'll add, Terry, I think one of the catalysts for this was probably Governor Josh Shapiro. This has been a key priority for him since he took office, that he's advocated for repeatedly, arguing that Pennsylvania has a shortage in teachers, and that this is a way to try and encourage more prospective teachers to plant roots in Pennsylvania.
All right, let's move on to another topic. We've been hearing a lot about them. I don't have one. I shouldn't talk about me, but I don't have one. An electric vehicle.
Yeah. So
where do they stand?
The legislature's been, batting around the idea of an electric vehicle fee for years now. They, haven't ever truly settled on a plan that they've agreed on. But the gist of it is that Pennsylvania is facing declining gas tax revenues, and that goes to some very important uses. And with declining revenues, more people shifting to electric vehicles away from gas-powered cars and automobiles, it raises the question of where do you get the money from? So that's kind of where this question of an EV fee originated, and I'll let Tom speak a little bit to the debate this week.
Yeah, I mean, just this week we sort of saw the bills get a little bit of focus over on the House side.
Right.
House Democrats, or at least one House Democrat, is proposing, started off at $125, then slowly hike it up to about $225, and then increase
Is it going anywhere? That's a big question.
Well, that's the question, Terry. And I think there's also a competing proposal, $290 a year, just a flat fee. And it sounds like everybody kind of wants to meet somewhere, but I would expect we might see something shake out in the budget process. If it doesn't happen sooner, I think it's probably going to be something negotiated. But the bottom line is, Terry, by the way, there's a tax people are already supposed to be paying on electric vehicles, but a lot of people just don't pay it, and that's why lawmakers are looking at this fee.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on for the update. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about savings, investment, and remember, we're in an inflationary period. What does all that mean? And we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by CrossState Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, we are in an inflationary period in our country, and it looks like it's getting worse. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of subjects related to budgeting, expense management, savings, debt management. Joining me to do that is the Auditor General of the state of Pennsylvania, Tim DeFoor, and Patrick Conway, who's the president of CrossState Credit Union Association. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for
Good to
having
be
us.
here.
All right, Mr. Auditor General, let me start with you. What is it that people should be doing as we get into this inflationary period and the concern about debt, the concern about, saving? There's a whole variety of aspects of our financial life, and you got the responsibility that it's being done legally. Do we got that right?
Right. So one of the things that they can do is be money smart. Here's what I mean by that. Educate yourselves. Anything with regards to any type of finances, whether we're talking about a deficit, whether we're talking about savings, whether we're talking about credit cards, saving for an emergency, buying a house, buying a car, educate yourself. And that's why I'm happy to say that April is also Financial Literacy Month. So, we've been crisscrossing the Commonwealth. As a matter of fact, we were at a financial literacy fair at Reading High School with CrossState Credit Union yesterday, where kids were being educated on financial literacy.
You raise a good point about starting it at a young age.
Absolutely.
Is that right, Patrick?
It is, and General DeFoor and his team are doing great work. Our credit unions around the Commonwealth are very passionate about financial literacy, and credit unions are in, about 250 school districts across the state. And, April's a great time to celebrate the importance of getting started early. And in fact, Tim was telling me before the program that some of these students come back and help their parents at home, which makes sense too with financial education in the household. So it's an important subject.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, but before I do, what's the biggest problem your office faces when it comes with folks who, I'll be candid with you, violate the law?
Well, a lot of times we think that the law's been violated intentionally. But when we take a deep dive into some of the audits that we do, it's because of people don't have an understanding of general checkbook management.
Is it called ignorance?
It's well, I call it a lack of financial literacy, and then and it's because of that we actually started. We initially started out the initiative from kindergarten to 12th grade, but we also realized by seeing that we also have to reach adults as well, because on the surface it may appear that it looks like fraud or someone's trying to do something deceitful, but when you really take a deep dive into some of these, it's just a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I must tell you, Pat, it seems to me that retirement planning is so critical and so crucial, and it seems to be something that we should continually emphasize.
Absolutely. You know, most Americans, Terry, are not prepared for retirement. And part of financial education, or just being financially literate, is understanding all of the phases of your financial lifespan. And that includes retirement. And so I think it's critical that, you know, the private and public sector work together to educate students at a younger age. And again, across many of our communities, the household may not really embrace financial literacy as well. So I think to the extent that we can create public-private partnerships like we have with the Auditor General to really bring more attention to financial education, the more we're helping families across the Commonwealth.
Is any of that done is more of that being done in the schools? I thought it was.
It is now. In fact, we now, you know, have a requirement that school districts across the state do embrace education.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I believe in school year 26-27, graduating seniors are going to have to take a half a credit of financial literacy. And that's a result of Senator Chris Gephardt's bill, which had bipartisan support, and which is fantastic. But there have been some schools across the state. We've gone to Erie, Philadelphia, Allegheny County, Scranton. We've visited schools that have been teaching financial literacy for decades.
Right.
And again, what was discussed a little while ago, the fallout of that is not only that some of these students are learning about financial literacy, they're able to teach their families, to teach their parents, to teach their siblings
Good
about
point.
it.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, seeking professional advice. Who can be helpful? We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
All right, we're going to continue our discussion of financial education and how important it is. And let me turn to Patrick Conway. He's the president of the CrossState Credit Union Association. Seeking professional advice. How do you know who you should be consulting when it comes to this? There's so many people out there soliciting our advice to give them our money, correct?
Terry, that's a great question. And I think the best answer I can offer would be, you know, whoever you're comfortable with. Representing credit unions, I know that many of our financial institutions do provide certification to their staff members.
Right.
So they can meet with credit union members and their families and provide that expertise. But whether it's there or at a financial advisor, family member, it could be a mentor, someone in the community, or a teacher. You know, those are all potential resources. There's a lot of help out there. It's important that consumers find someone that can provide that assistance, someone they're comfortable with. A trusted financial advisor is what many of our credit unions try to be to their folks in the community.
Sure. All right, Mr. Auditor General, one of your jobs is to make sure that people don't break the law in terms of their financial dealing and other dealings. What's your biggest problem?
Biggest problem is, and I said this earlier, is when and I'm going to go back to when I was with the Inspector General's office and back when I was with the Attorney General's office, where you are investigating a case or you're performing an audit, and there are clearly mistakes that are made. And because of the mistakes, it looks like there was actual fraud there. But again, it's just, a lot of them are just simple misunderstandings with regards to.
Is there an area in the economy that you could cite as the most common in terms of the violations?
As far as, I really can't. I really can't because it happens everywhere.
Oh, it happens everywhere.
It really
Great
does.
point.
It happens everywhere, and again, that's because of a lack of just understanding. There are times when there may be one person may be responsible for, let's say, a medical office's billings or for a small municipality's pension plan. You have one person that's responsible for everything, and they may not necessarily understand how to do the calculations for that.
Sure.
And the accounting things with regards to that. So they're constantly making errors, and at times when, because of an error that's made, when they get something that more money than they should have got, then you kind of think, okay, is that fraud? But then once you do a deeper dive, and once you actually speak to them, you realize that it was was just a mistake. So you let them know what the mistake was. But of course, any funds that they received because they shouldn't have received, those funds are then recouped.
Great point. All right, Patrick, retirement planning, you can't start it when you're 65 or 70, can you?
No, you can't. You have to start early. You've got to prepare. I know that having two kids in their 20s, my son just started a job 2 years ago, and he's socking away money in his 401k, and that's great. And so I think to the extent you're able to park some money and save it, take some of your savings and invest it for the long term. We talked about financial advice and counseling. Find the right resource that's available to you. Even if it's a tiny bit, do what you can each day to prepare for the future. And it's going to be critical for everybody.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when my niece got her first job, my brother told her, I don't care if it's $10, put it away in your pension. Then every raise you get, add a little more. But every paycheck, something should go towards saving for retirement.
There are some positions where there are investment opportunities already there for the long term, and others it's completely left to your own devices.
Yes, there are choices depending on your employment situation and whatever plan may be in place. But it's important to get into the habit of setting aside financial resources. It's easy when you're in your 20s and 30s to think that's a long way off. But we all know time goes very quickly. And just being prepared, taking advantage of opportunities to learn about financial literacy and to access resources that are available in the community is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's Financial Literacy Month. So this month would be a great time for everybody to go over all their finances.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.